Welcome to Organizational Sherlocks, the podcast where business meets psychology and your organizational puzzles meet their match.
Join us for captivating stories and practical solutions to unravel your toughest challenges.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, your guides to a prescription for business success.
Let's dive in. Well, welcome back, everyone. We're excited to talk with you a little bit about this podcast, Organizational Sherlocks, and what we're hoping to cover, because ultimately Morgan and I want this to be a podcast for everyone, not just, for IO professionals or people considering IO, but really anyone who engages in business, right? Which, as we talked about in the previous podcast, is all of us. So we're excited to get a little bit more, as we referenced in the previous one, a little bit more into the nitty-gritty and talk with you about, what it's all about. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Morgan, because I would love to understand from your perspective, when you think about the purpose of this podcast, what are you looking to accomplish?
Yeah. So with Organizational Sherlocks, what we're looking to accomplish is solving all those mysteries that you see in a business, whether it be the mystery of people, the mystery of processes, the mystery of how to develop and build an organization, hence the name, clearly.
There's a lot of them too, so.
Yeah. And there's a lot of mysteries to solve. And so what this podcast really means to me is Elizabeth and I get to, one, learn ourselves as we talk about these topics. We're learning from each other. We're learning from the research we're doing, preparing for these podcasts. But we're also learning from the professionals that we're going to be bringing in. We're going to be bringing lots of featured celebrity hosts of all sorts, from all sorts of fields, from managers to leaders to owners of businesses to consultants, all sorts of individuals. So you're not going to get bored. I promise you that.
Oh, no, not even close.
Yeah. But just overall, the purpose of Organizational Sherlocks is to be an informative, educational podcast on organizational dilemmas. So we are going to talk about the dilemmas you could face as an employee, as a manager, as a new hire. We're going to talk about all of those and help you navigate it. Elizabeth, why don't you talk a little bit more about why we want to help people navigate these types of situations, or what types of situations we'll likely fall into?
Yeah, well, I could get super nerdy and get into the data right now, but I'm not going to. I'm going to save that for a future podcast. So you'll have to come back and listen to my data nerd self at some point. But, I think that there's so many just different factors at play. And so when we think about these organizational dilemmas, there's just so many pieces that are coming at from, or like, how do I want to say this, kind of coming at the dilemmas in a weird way, right? Like there's the macro factors, like, regional differences. We've mentioned before that, I'm in the Midwest and you're over on the East Coast. And so we have differences, right? There's market conditions, there's, economic conditions, all of those things. And I think being able to apply the research and apply those factors to understand how the dilemmas have come to be, but even more so, what can be done about them to make it better, right? So for me, it's really about just giving people tools, helping you build that toolbox so that you can, bring it to your boss or bring it to your leadership team and say, hey, I heard this, just wanted to see if this would stick for us, And so I think that's really what this is all about for me, is just giving people information, because ultimately information is power,
Yeah, information is power. I love that. It definitely is. And information is power, even not only on the employee side, but on an owner's side or the manager's side. That's the whole thing. IO psychology is a bridge between employees and owners of companies. And I feel that's something that gets lost in the translation of the educational system with IO psychology. As an IO psychologist, you can help owners connect with their employees, but you can help employees connect with their owners or their managers.
Right.
And so our dilemmas that we're talking about, they're going to be dilemmas where we're talking about both sides of the situation. You're going to be able to understand your owner or your manager better, and your manager is going to be able to understand you better, or vice versa. You're going to be able to understand your employee better, and they'll be able to understand you more. That's what we're hoping. Let's bridge this gap that exists between higher level business processes in the executive and managerial staff versus the lower level, entry level type of positions. They're all needed. So why should they work against each other, right?
Right. Well, and how, I mean, in a perfect world too, even, you know, kind of your top executives would be involved with all of the people in the organization, right? Being kind of stakeholders in an internship program, for instance, or an apprenticeship program, and really just kind of, you know, making sure that, like you said, we're bridging that gap, but also kind of creating opportunities to build a stronger bridge, if that's fair.
I love my metaphors, and I can tell you're starting to pick up on that, Elizabeth.
I do too.
Elizabeth and I talked for months prepping for this podcast, and she could tell I use metaphors a lot, and that's because sometimes it's hard to explain it in the real world, but if you can explain it in a simple metaphor, it really creates that higher level meaning. So sorry in advance for all the metaphors you are going to hear come out of my mouth through this podcast. I'm sure you guys will love them though.
Same. You know what? It's a good visualization sometimes though too, right? Yeah. Being able to visualize kind of what because these topics are complex at times, right? So to have a visual, I think, can sometimes make it a little bit more, you know, understandable.
More clear. Talk about these topics that we're going to cover. What are we going to cover? That's what you guys are all listening for.
Oh gosh, yeah, duh. We should probably say that, huh?
Yeah. So, I mean, number one, I come from the human resources field, and so I work on human resources strategy and organizational development. That got me the position as chief people officer at my current company. I love what I do. I am definitely more than just the typical HR person you're probably thinking of in your head right now. I promise I'm not that. Not that they are bad either, because you're missing out on all of the back end things that they're helping out with. So all the people operations, the softwares, the processes behind the company that make it what it is.
There's somebody behind the curtain. There's another one, right? Wizard of Oz. Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Are you Dorothy or am I?
I don't know. I like to think I'd be Oz. I don't know. I kind of always have stuff going on in the background.
I was Dorothy for Halloween, funny enough. So,
hey, there you go.
Maybe I'm Dorothy.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, but so my favorite topic, which we're going to touch on a lot because you're going to see it in every topic, is people operations. We're going to talk about people operations when it comes to leadership, when it comes to hiring, talent acquisition, when it comes to learning and development, when it comes to performance management. We're going to talk about people operations, how to motivate people, how to, motivate yourself even in the workplace. And maybe even how to get your managers to buy in to new tactics for motivation. So developmental efforts you want to develop in your career, have managers help you do that. Or also, what can you do to motivate your managers to be a little different, or vice versa?
Being into that influence, right? And the kind of inspiring others to take action, right?
Yeah, lead from the group. Don't lead from above.
Yeah,
the best leaders are the ones that come out from the group, not the ones that are just pushed up to be a manager or a boss. There's successful leadership, and that's a boss, it's a manager.
Sure.
And then there's effective leadership. That's someone that came out from the group and was just this shining star, I guess. And people operations really tends to touch on that, but it also touches on the smaller little pieces of dealing with difficult situations between employees even, or hiring the right people.
Yeah. Well, you just brought up something, which is leadership development, which is an area that I work in quite a bit every day, actually. And kind of both the development and the selection of effective leaders, right? And so I think that's an area too that we will definitely be talking about. What is leadership development all about? What does it look like? What is the experience of the organization? Kind of, putting leaders into these positions, but what is it like to be a leader or an aspiring leader, and trying to create this kind of this new self, right? And this new self within this new role. And so that's an area that we'll definitely be talking about as well. But an area I wanted to also touch on really quickly was something that's really important to me, which is alignment and this idea of alignment, right? And finding, kind of figuring out what is it that motivates you, right? What is it that motivates your people, your team, your colleagues, whoever it is around you, and then being able to create some alignment in that space. And so, again, it's both people alignment, but it's also mission alignment. So I know we have a guest that's going to be coming up here in a few podcast episodes that's going to be talking with us about, how do you maintain mission alignment when you merge two big companies, right? What does that look like? And what's that experience like, both from the leadership perspective and the employees? So there's a lot in store when it comes to leadership and alignment as well.
Yeah. And for all those 20th century owners and high level managers that might be rolling your eyes at us because we're talking about leadership development and their people and this and that, don't forget that the people that you develop through that leadership development, they are following along in your path so that you can focus on higher level pieces of the company while they can have autonomy, and you have the confidence in them having that autonomy to work where you once were in the company. So please know that we are doing this for both the higher level executives, those owners, and the individuals that want to go through the leadership development. Elizabeth, you talking about alignment. Again, it's great to hear, because that's another big piece of why we started this podcast. Elizabeth and I talked about it a lot. We feel that there's a lack of alignment when it comes to just the IO psychology world in and of itself. I mean, IO psychology in Europe and other Western parts of the world, and even in the Eastern world, are very different from how it is in the US.
Very much.
So I've talked with IO psychologists that can call themselves IO psychologists despite only having a master's degree in Africa, in Spain, that they treat IO psychology differently than we do here in the US. And so that's why that's a big piece of why we want to talk about IO psychology in a bigger business sense, and less on just the, I guess, IO employee side that it's always existed. And I mean,
there's brilliant.
Go.
There's brilliant people doing brilliant things across the world. I mean, I think it's really cool. I've had the opportunity to talk with some people from other countries and their experiences, and I think that something that I've really noticed and I've experienced in kind of the, talking to potential clients or prospective clients and all of that, is there's just simply a lack of education about psychology and business. I mean, I think it kind of, again, goes back to that, creating the flow chart of what are all the things, but there's just a lack of education. And so again, I think that's another part, is we're just trying to offer some education for people, right? And using this as an outlet to do so. So I think that's really exciting. And I think it'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, you take me back to the days when I was in business classes before I decided I don't need a business degree on top of my psychology degree, knowing I was going into IO psychology. But you take me back to that, because I remember my managerial courses, I was learning psychological principles with similar but still different names, and I was learning the same theories, but it was missing parts. I already took this course in psychology, but now I'm taking it in management too. Why aren't we having our business students take psychology courses instead of some of these clearly aligned, the word alignment there comes again,
there it is.
With aligned courses? They're similar courses, but one's just a little bit deeper into the topics of psychology, while one really just touches on it. But then at the same time, these psychology students, they're missing these structural plans and like SWOT analyses. You don't talk about that as much in psychology, but you talk about it in business. Why aren't we connecting these courses? And that's what Elizabeth and I are here for. We're connecting it. So whether you went to school for psychology, you went to school for business, you went to school for marketing, we're helping you connect all of these different processes you've learned about. We're going to talk about marketing. I actually lead the marketing for my company, despite
I
being
do
chief
a
people
lot of
officer.
marketing as well. A lot.
Yes. I mean, Elizabeth's practically a sales rep sometimes as an external consultant even. So
Here I am.
you're going to hear us talk about all the topics. I actually, Elizabeth liked my LinkedIn post I saw, so she can't escape this one. I'm going to ask her, what about, I posted about the trade show. What did I say? About how psychology connects despite me not being a sales rep, right?
I mean, yes, it's constantly there, right? I mean, you're there and understanding people, right? I think that's the ultimate essence of it, right? Is understanding and paying attention to people, which is exactly what you had to do at that trade show, right? You had to know who was in the room to be able to have a conversation with them in a way that would help you get across what it is that your company does, right?
Yeah, I talked about how your booth location that
All
can
of it.
affect how you pull people in. Your the setup of your booth,
The
just the way
colors.
you approach people. Yeah, colors, even the
Yes.
way you dress at different trade shows. I mean, my team went to 3 different trade shows, had 4 different booths in the past week. It was a
Right.
travel week last week. I was exhausted. Elizabeth can attest.
I sure
So,
can.
but I worked one show and I dressed completely differently than one of my other individuals did another show. And yes, it's partly because we have different styles. You shouldn't completely change for
Right.
these trade shows. But you could tell, like, one of them, like my show, I was dressed up. I was also in Vegas, so I wanted to be a little more dressed up because
I mean, who doesn't want to do that in Vegas, right?
what happens in Vegas really stay in Vegas?
Not if it's related to a trade show or business. I think you can bring that back to your company.
Exactly. But then, and I'm wearing heels, all the like at the show, obviously booted heels, comfortable heels. I'm walking around all day.
Right.
And then, but one of my other sales team members, they're wearing sneakers because that's the type of show they're at. And that's okay. One of our team went to USA Track and Field for a trade show back in, I think it was November, early December. And they actually had a gala and it was wear your favorite pair of sneakers night.
Oh, that sounds like my kind of gala.
Know the people you're attracting to your company. You're going to make connections no matter if you're a sales team member or you are a production worker. I mean, you could change how someone perceives the company and you could change how your coworkers perceive the company, even good or bad.
I mean, ultimately, even at, family dinners or when you're out with your friends, I mean, you're constantly selling your company regardless of your position, right? When they ask you, and I'm sure I would love to do a poll on this one and see how many people have been asked this question, but when they say, how's work going? What are you doing these days? Right? That's an opportunity for you to sell your company. So we're all in sales, we're all in marketing, we're all in all of these different things, but it would be remiss too. And I think this maybe is a future episode, Morgan, that we could talk about around, we kind of mentioned like how you show up, right? Like what you wear or, what the colors are on your banners and all of that. I think accessibility is a huge thing too, from, a DE&I perspective and, like vision impairment and hearing impairment and all of the different things that are so important for people. I think maybe we can get somebody on who can talk about accessibility. I might have someone in mind.
Okay, well, good to know. I definitely have some individuals in mind as well. We have a big part of the industry that my company's involved in. It's all about accessibility right now and being fair across all margins. So we're going to talk about disabilities. We're going to talk about neurodivergence. I know Elizabeth loves that. She's very excited. I just mentioned that.
I do.
Yeah. Hey, this is the clinical psychology talking, I think.
It could be a little personal experience, but definitely some of the clinical work too. So
yeah, but overall, we're going to cover business subjects in every sort. So we're going to talk about people operations. We're going to talk about sales. We're going to talk about marketing. We're going to talk about alignment. We're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about budgeting. We're going to talk about accounting, financials. You see it in your life, in business, we're going to talk about it. So maybe not every podcast is going to be your cup of tea, but it's going to be a place for you to learn because, hey, in order to grow in a company, you're going to have to learn more parts of the company. As I always tell my team, my managers, you got to have a global perspective. You really need to have that. You got to have a bird's eye view or you're going to lose track of what your employees are doing or what other teams are doing.
Absolutely.
So we're really going to help you guys develop those global perspectives and help us do it too. We don't want to be so fine-tuned into this podcast that we forget that this subject exists, or maybe a new topic is coming up in the world. Like, hey, we've talked about quiet quitting, quiet firing, all of the sorts
All of it, yes.
in the IO psychology world. And we'll get into that too for those of you who are, what is that? So comment, email us, let us know what you want us to talk about. Give us a story from something that happened at your company. We don't have to name names. We don't have to talk about the company, but we can talk about the situation and we can touch on it. This podcast is going to be all about storytelling. We're trying to put it in a way that it's just easy to understand. I mean, I feel like you guys are getting tired of me talking, so I'm going to let Elizabeth take over for a little bit, even though I can keep talking about this.
I think I'm really excited about this. And I really would love to see a ton of engagement, kind of as you just called out, because there are, we are two people in this humongous sea of business psychology people, right? And we want to hear from you. We want to understand what you want to know about. And, if you have thoughts or you have a research article you found really interesting, feel free to send it our way. We are constant learners, so we're learning with you. And we hope that you'll join us for our next episode, and reach out.
Yeah. With the ever-changing landscape of business these days, let's all work together to understand it. And as we say, investigate and be the best detectives we can be.
Awesome. See you next time.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
This concludes another intriguing episode of Organizational Sherlocks. I'm Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, reminding you that the journey to success is an ongoing investigation.
Stay curious, stay strategic, and keep utilizing insights to decode your business mysteries.
Join us every other Tuesday for your next Whodunit. This is Organizational Sherlocks, closing today's case.